So this is a little baby dress that I made, front and the back. And right here, I'm going to put the facing inside the back. That's where there'll be a button and a little loop, elastic loop to attach to the button here in just a little bit. But right now I'm just attaching that facing to the back bodice. Now I'm at the machine and I'm going to sew that. I go slow and I try to keep it right on the edge of that facing there. Now I'm over at the serger and I'm going to attach the back and the front. So I've got right sides facing each other, and I'm going to put the pin in there at the shoulders, and I'm going to serge the tops of those here in just a second. There I am. I take the pin out and then I serge. I'm going to clip the threads. Making sure it's all lined up and straight. Pull the pin out, and then I'm going to serge that shoulder. Now I'm attaching the facing for the neckline, and I'm just putting the facing onto the neckline so that I can take it over to the machine and sew that on here in just a second. I think right here's where I realized that it's a little bit too long, and I try to fold it down, but it's too much fabric, so I end up having to cut that a little bit on the end, and then I push it down, and then I can pin it. It's not too thick. Took me a little bit. I had to fiddle with it for a minute or two to get that in there. I should have just took it over to the iron and repressed it, and then, but I finally get it. Now I'm at the machine, and I'm going to sew that facing onto the neckline. I go super slow, and I keep it right on that neckline. Sorry about my dogs barking. The mailman's delivering something and they're barking at him. Right there's where I'm going to sew that round corded elastic on that I use for the button. I didn't show inserting that, but I just inserted it in the end of the facing there, and then I sewed it on. You can see it right there. That's round corded elastic. And I didn't show sewing the button on, but I do sew the button on. Right here, I'm going to put my gathering stitches in so that I can gather the front of the dress that's going to attach to the bodice. So I'll end up putting 2 separate rows of stitching at a 6 length, so that that's a big length, so that I'll be able to pull the bobbin threads to make my gathering. So I just get right next to the one that I just put in, and I'm going to sew another row with long tails so that I'll have something to pull on whenever I get ready to pull those gathers in. And I pull both of the threads. It seems to make a really pretty gather if you pull both of them at the same time. Some people, I think, use one. I'm not sure, but I think they just do one, but I use both. Right there, I'm separating the top and bottom threads so that I can pull on them to put the gathers in. I end up picking up a little pin to separate those with because I couldn't get them apart. And there I am putting the gathers in, just pulling those threads and moving those gathers down. Once you get your gathers in, you want that to be the width of the bodice so that they'll sew together even. So the top and the bodice and that will be the same length, and then you'll pin them together and you'll sew them. So there I am with the bodice now, and I'm going to pin each end. So I'm moving the gathers out a little bit. I'm going to put a pin in there. I'm going to pin the other end. And then I just kind of separate those to where they fit. So I make the bodice and the gathers fit evenly. So I stretch them out and kind of separate my gathers, and then I'm going to pin that. I'm new to all this, so hopefully y'all don't judge me too harshly. This is my first ever recording and voiceover. So right here, I'm back at the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew across those gathers to keep them in place. I bought this pattern off of Etsy, so I'm not going to give out the seam allowances or anything because it's, I'm making a pattern that I bought off of Etsy. It's not my pattern, so. Taking the pins out and sewing across there, just making sure. I actually sew in between the two lines, so it gives me a good little gather there. It's real pretty whenever I'm finished. So there it is. And now I'm going to take that. I believe I take it over to the serger. I'm at the serger now. And I'm going to serge across that. Just makes for a prettier seam. My serger is an industrial serger. It's a Juki. It's a MO 6700 DA. Now I'm back at the machine. I'm going to top stitch right here. So I'm top stitching I just serge that and I push it upward, I believe, and then I top stitch across that. And I believe I turn my top stitch up to a 3. So I'm sewing that with a 3 on my top stitch there. And that's just preference. I do the same thing on the back. I do the little gathers and then I attach it to the bodice and then I sew across the stitches and then I serge it. And now I'm actually doing the sleeves. So I'm going to serge the top part of the sleeve, or not serge it, I'm sorry. I'm going to stitch so that I can do gathers. And I end up just putting one row of stitches in that, and then I pull and make gathers, and then I sew that. I attach it to the dress and to the armhole here in just a second. I think I'm attaching it right now. I'm attaching it to the dress. But I did actually sew across that once and put some gathers in it, and the pattern tells you where to put those. It's just right at the very top. There's just a few gathers in the top. Now I'm going to sew it in. Or no, at that point, I guess I decide to go ahead and put the gathers in the second one And you can see me sewing that one now. So just sew across it once, just the top portion. I'm going to leave some long tails so that I can gather it. I'm a little out of frame there, but I'm gathering there. At this point, it looks like I've actually stitched those in. I just went around them just like I did on the bodice and the back piece and the bodice and the front piece. I just sew in the sleeves just with the recommended seam allowance. Now I'm pulling those threads out so that they're not in there where you can see them, the ones that I use for gathering. There I am sewing the second sleeve. I'm going to sew it on. Just making sure I keep the dress and everything out of the way of the machine and only serging the sleeve portion to the dress. I'm trying to make sure I keep those strings and pull the pins out and keep the strings out of the way so that I can take those out whenever I get finished. The gathering strings. Here I am at the serger. I'm serging the sleeve now. Making sure to keep everything out of the way. It just makes it look neater, professional. Now I'm back in the machine and I'm going to top stitch the sleeves. Again with a number 3 seam allowance or stitch length there. Trying to stay right on that seam. making sure the gathers are kind of laying flat so that whenever I go across it, I'm not sewing on them and messing them up. There's the sleeve, top stitched. Now I'm back at the serger. I serged all from the armhole down, and then I did the other side, and now I've finished the dress. I didn't show hemming it, but I did hem the dress, and I put elastic in the sleeves.